Hello, Anna. Hi Anna,
Hi.
how are you? We are so glad to have you here at the Public Go Live social events.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be
Anna,
here.
you have a huge fan base in Greece. You know that, right?
Yes. It sounds weird to say, but yes, I do. I get a lot of support from Greece. It's great.
What made you start writing your own stories? You're very inspirational as an author.
Thank you. It was mostly just my love of books in general and my love of reading. I kind of got in this weird place where I felt like I was kind of reading the same books over and over, and nothing was
Mhm.
really drawing me in the way I wanted to be drawn in. So I just basically wrote the book that I wanted to read, and then it turned into this big thing.
The huge bestseller. What was it like seeing your book in print for the very first time?
It was really surreal. Even still to this day, whenever I have a new release, I love to go to, well, pre COVID, love to
Mm.
go to bookstores and see my books in the stores. It never really gets old. Like when I travel, I go to train stations and check for my books. And it's really cool, especially because being a reader is such a huge part of my identity. So having my books be everywhere in the world is amazing.
As a kid from the 90s, were you starstruck when Selma Blair signed on for the movie?
Definitely. I even when people were bringing her up, I was like, "There's no way Selma Blair's gonna want to be in this movie." And she's so great, and she's such an icon, and she's just a literal legend. So it was really amazing to work with her. The second film, we didn't get as much time with her because of her diagnosis of MS, and she couldn't travel. But we still found a way to make it work to have her in the movie. But she's a legend.
Do you have any advice, any tip for someone who's an aspiring author?
I would say to create your own path. I would say to not take the traditional route of looking for an agent and a publisher. I would just write for you and then find your own way. Use the internet, use a lot of resources from online. Don't be afraid of no, because right now publishing is in this weird kind of transition of realizing that they need to change the way they've been operating for so long, and a lot of my publishers, I think, have learned from this modern way of reading and writing that they're starting to adapt. I think it's time for new voices to be heard, so I encourage everyone to write. It doesn't matter if you don't feel like you're a writer, or if some journalist or critic or whatever thinks that you're not a writer. The only thing it takes to be a writer is to write, so that's all you have to do.
Is there a book quote that will always inspire you?
Oh, there's so many. I would say probably there's a Cassandra Clare quote that I can't think of the entire thing, but it's basically says that reading changes you and that every word that you read changes a part of you, which I very much believe that. I think even growing up, I was from a very small town. I didn't know a lot about other cultures or other people. And reading really opened my eyes to a whole world of things. And I think people can be less ignorant and less afraid of things and afraid of other people and other cultures and just the world in general if we read more. So that quote kind of reminds me of that.
How many books do you read monthly, let's say?
Uh, oh, lately it's been like one, but typically if I have free time, I can read like four in a month.
That's good. How have your writing rituals changed now that you are a published author?
Well, there's a lot less time to actually write, which is the downside of it, because the fun part for me is the writing, but then when I'm published now, there's the whole other business side of it. And then there's the films, and there's all these other things that take time away from the actual writing process. So I definitely spend more time kind of working than writing, so that my rituals change in that way, where before I could just sit on my laptop all day and write whatever I wanted and it came out. And now there's like a whole business side that I don't get to do that as often.
You're also a producer, right? How
Yep.
does this ongoing conversation that you have with your fans affect the way that you write now, or the
It's
book that you
definitely
write?
Yeah, it's definitely affected the way that I kind of not teach them, but tell them certain things. Like, with the Brightest Stars series, which is a different series from After, but we're going through this really big kind of social change in the world. And I think a lot of countries are going through it as well, just in different ways. So I make sure that I put relevant topics that they can relate to and maybe even learn about, I guess, in a way. I've
Mhm.
realized by talking to them so often the things that affect their daily life and the way that they feel about themselves or their confidence and things like that. So I put a lot of that into my writing now that I know kind of my audience better.
Yes. Do you hear their voice when they send you messages or text you about social media about the books that you're writing, the stories?
Yeah, definitely. I There's a balance though, because I also don't want to write just for an audience. I want to write whatever I want and hopefully they'll like it and maybe they won't, but I
Mhm.
let them influence the way I write, but not to a point where they're kind of controlling what I'm writing.
Yes. What is the endless source of inspiration for you?
I just have a really big imagination. I've always been like that. And it's funny now as an adult that all the things that I thought were kind of weird about myself have turned into my career because I always created scenarios in my head and I would like see someone on the street and make up a whole story in my head about their life. And now it makes a lot of sense that I'm a writer and that I can just
You
come up
create
with
these
stories.
personalities, these heroes from the
Yeah, I
stories.
just create like whole lives and personalities and things just from seeing a random stranger. So now I feel like it makes sense because I'm a writer. But when I was younger, I was like, why is my brain so weird and why won't it shut off?
And to your biggest asset now, how do you approach writing a sex scene?
I mean, honestly, it just kind of comes naturally. It depends on what is going on, if it's a tense one or if it's just like for fun or if it
Yes.
has a story behind it kind of. For me, I read a lot of not only just YA novels, but I read a lot of erotic novels as well. And I don't know, for some reason it just naturally comes out. Sex scenes to me are easier to write than like first meetings. When people first meet each other is
Mhm.
more hard for me than a sex scene. I feel like sex scenes, if you put pressure on them in your head, they're hard to write. But if you just write like if it were two humans and they were being intimate, it just comes out so much easier.
If your friend, a friend of yours, was dating Hardy, what would you do?
I would definitely tell her to run for the hills. Um, I in fiction, I love complicated characters, and I don't believe in judging people by mistakes they make when they're young. So,
Hmm.
part of me would like to try to understand Hardin, but I don't think I would advise my friend to date him by any means until he gets the help he needs. And Hardin is a very tortured, complicated person. So the grown up Hardin for me is a really great character and he's a really good guy and he's learned from his past. But if somebody met him, in college, I would be like, no.
Why do you think the audience, the people, are so drawn to Tessa and Hardy's affair?
I think it's the flaws, the fact that both characters are very flawed. Even Tessa, who appears to be this kind of perfect girl, she's extremely flawed. She's judgmental, she's sheltered, she is very headstrong. And when she doesn't understand something, she kind of turns it into a fight. She's very immature. She's manipulative. Hardin is obviously, has his own problems and he's manipulative as well. So I think it's this up and down, and you never really know if they're going to figure it out this time or if they're going to continue the cycle. Even for me, I sometimes was like, there's no way these two are going to end up together because they just are so bad together. But I think that's what draws people in. And that's, I think, what kept me writing it and being so passionate was not knowing what their next step was going to be and what they would do.
Yes, what an imagination. How inspiring would be to write a new chapter of your story taking place in Greece?
That would be really cool,
Post
actually.
COVID, I guess.
Yeah, post COVID, that would be really cool. I've always wanted to go to Greece. I think most people I know want to go to Greece. So
Yeah.
COVID's really ruined that, but for now, but that would be cool.
Yes. How do you imagine love in the years of COVID? I mean, it doesn't seem that we'll end up pretty soon. The
I don't
story.
I don't know. I had a conversation with a friend the other day of like, how are people even dating? Are
Mm.
you, you know, taking
If you're
COVID
single.
tests? Yeah, it's weird. And I also think that right now we're doing everybody's kind of living in a different reality now. So I'm worried that, especially with online dating during COVID, I'm worried that people are projecting a different version of themselves more than they realize because we've been isolated. We have been alone with our thoughts more. So I feel like it's kind of like, not to be pessimistic, but I feel like it's a little scarier personality
Whoa.
wise because I think people are our personalities and the way we feel about things are probably different than it was 9 months ago. So it
Mm.
feels like it's already hard enough to get to know someone when you're dating anyway, but when you're both projecting this kind of new version of yourself, it makes it even more complicated. Not to mention the whole like, is it safe
That's
to
dangerous.
meet? And
Yes.
is it safe to kiss someone? Do you get a COVID test before you kiss them the first time? Like, I do not feel I would be, I don't know what the heck I would do if I had to date
Yes.
during COVID.
Could you imagine dating without kissing? Now it's
If they
happening.
were if they were intelligent enough, yes, actually. I think
Mm.
if they could keep a conversation, which I guess is a good test of somebody to date because if you only kiss and you can't have a conversation, you have a problem there too.
Do you want Hardin and Tessa to end up together? What's your thought?
I do. I do. I think they go through a lot of trauma together and they go through a lot of ups and a lot of downs. But I
Mm.
don't believe in the idea that just because somebody makes bad choices, I mean, obviously it depends on the choices they make, but I don't believe in judging someone for the rest of their lives. I don't believe that just because Tessa and Hardin are very flawed and make mistakes when they're literally only 19 and 20, I don't believe that they should be alone forever. So I think that they deserve a happy ending at the end. But if it were real life, it would be a little more complicated than that. But I do want them together and I root for them.
You've been married the whole time since you started writing the book. Did you base the stories on personal experience or the stories on personal experiences of other people that you hear?
It was a mixture of both. I've been married like almost half my life now, so I feel like we every couple years we kind of get a different version of each other because we grow up and grow to the adult versions of ourselves. So we go through these kind of new dating periods every few years. So I feel like we've gotten to date different versions of ourselves and each other.
Mm.
So a lot of it, the fighting and the like, the repetitiveness of making the same mistake over and over, we've done that. Like the first couple years of our marriage, we just kept fighting over the same stuff, and it was like, what are we like, how do you get out of this cycle? And then it's when you mature. But also for me, having come from a pretty traumatic childhood, I relate to Harding in that way where I immediately kind of go back in my mind and go to my childhood, and I didn't know exactly how to even really love someone. I loved my husband, but when we were 18, you don't even really like, who knows what that even is. So I'm very fortunate that I found someone who we've grown together and we have matured together. But childhood trauma can affect a lot of relationships and a lot of who you are and how you see the world. So while I was kind of not really dealing with my childhood trauma, my marriage was harder. So a lot of Hardin's kind of emotional outbursts and up and downs are inspired by my marriage, but not by my husband, more by me. And my husband's more of the like calm, level headed one, and I'm more of the like emotional one.
Explosive. Yes.
Yeah.
What is the secret to successful marriage after so many years? You've been married so young.
I mean, I don't really know if there is a secret. I think it's just marrying the right person. And I'm not. even though I have been married so long, I'm not a person that believes that, we have one soulmate and if you meet them, everything's perfect. I think you just have to be prepared to put effort into a marriage, and you have to make sure that you're giving time to the person that you're spending your life with, and you're not getting distracted by the world and getting, kind of bored. I think people get bored because they don't put energy into relationships anymore, and they
Yes.
think that I think it's a mixture of, seeing all these love stories and reading all these love stories. I'm a very cynical person, even though I love romance. So for me, it's more about just compatibility. It takes a lot of work to live and be with someone all the time, whether you're married or you're a friend. So it just depends how much time and energy and how important that relationship is to you.
Do you believe in love on the first sight as you show that on your books?
No,
No.
I don't. I believe in passion at first sight, and I believe
Mm,
in lust. I believe that you can have a very strong connection with someone the moment you meet them, but I don't think that's love necessarily. I think it's
mm.
more of a either obsession or a lustful thing, which I don't think is bad by any means, but I don't think that you can love someone after, 5 minutes of knowing them.
Yes. Are you writing to satisfy your fans or yourself?
Myself, definitely. Otherwise, I probably would have made after a little less dramatic. I get a lot of, I think probably one of my favorite things is how frustrated my readers get while reading my books. I like when they're frustrated, even if they send me emails and say, like, I'm never reading your books again because they're so stressful. I love that. I want you to feel something. I don't want to write books that are just like, meh, like you could love it or not. I want to write books that give people a visceral reaction of either you love it or you think it's the worst thing you've ever read in the world.
How is the daily life when you're writing a book? I mean, do you isolate yourself in your room and you write for hours, or you do that at night? I mean, how do you work?
I have to be isolated. I have to be completely all in it mentally. I can't
Mhm.
really write while distracted. Otherwise, it just ends up I hate what I write. So I
Yep.
have to be very into it. Like I will make a playlist and I have to listen to the playlist all day, every day. I have to think about the characters. I have to watch if they're based off real people. I'll watch YouTube videos of that person doing interviews or TV show that they're in. And I really have to be like immersed in the story. Otherwise, I don't end up happy with the outcome. I know some writers that like schedule, from 9 to noon, I'm going to write my book and then I'm going to do this. I can't do that. I have to be like, I pretty much can't do anything else while I'm writing something that I actually really am passionate about.
Great. What was the most challenging thing about seeing your book come to life on screen?
I think just the collaborating part and the changes, because for me, simple math is if something's successful, why change it? And I think a lot of times with adaptations, they go for the trends and whatever is, popular right now. So even if something works in a book, some random executive or some random producer could think, oh, well, actually, I like this better and change it. And for me, I was like, well, I just can't. Even now, I mean, there's going to be 4 movies, and I still just don't understand the logic behind changing things unnecessarily. Taking things out, I understand because of timing, and a lot of things just don't adapt. But when it comes to adding new random things when the books are already a million
Rich
words
information.
long,
Yeah.
there's plenty of inspiration from the original asset. So I don't like the idea when it comes to adapting when people make up their own kind of version of the story when millions of people love the story for a reason.
Yes. How involved have you been with the script? And were there scenes that you had to cut?
Yeah, there were a lot of scenes in the first and second movie. In the second movie, I wrote the script with a co-writer, but the version that was shot was pretty different than what I wrote. And that's just part of filmmaking. The director comes in and kind of does their own thing. And sometimes you win the battle and sometimes you lose it. But
Yep.
there were a lot of things that got cut. And I think the most the things that bothered me the most being cut were the more emotional parts, because After is a very dark, moody romance. It's not supposed to be like a lighthearted, funny movie. And I feel like when you add a different element such as comedy, it changes the characters a little bit. So I feel like, with that, I was very involved, but at the same time, not every single thing I said or wanted got into the film.
Yes. Your books have a great fan base. How much pressure did that put on making the film?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah,
um,
that you
yeah,
don't
because
disappoint the fans, the book fans.
yeah, and both times there's been a really large amount of people that are disappointed, and it's frustrating for me because I put so much energy into trying to make it the best for the fans, but there's only so much I can do when, other producers or the director wants to do certain things. So for me, I just feel this responsibility of it's my job to protect my fan base, but when I'm the only one doing it, it's a little hard, to get that to be reality. But at the same time, I am very proud that even just my story that came from the internet, that because of my fans has now, going to be 4 movies. So it's a hard balance, but the pressure is more of a responsibility to me than a pressure, I guess.
Yes. How would you describe After to someone who has not read the book?
A roller coaster, an emotional roller coaster with very explosive, intense moments.
Yes. And as a producer, what did you learn about bringing a story to life on screen?
I mostly learned that not everything in a book should be on a screen, and you have to show and not tell. And as a novelist, all I do is tell. So there were times where, you don't naturally say someone's name all the time, but in a book you do for dramatic effect. There are things
Hmm.
like a conversation that in a book can be so important but could be told with eye looking each other in the eyes or body language. So for me, that was kind of the most fun part of learning, was learning how to show and not tell.
Yes, in Greece there is a lockdown due to the COVID pandemic. Now it starts in 2 days. What would you say to someone that wants to devote himself or herself to writing these days? I mean, it's a great situation for someone to devote himself or herself to writing, into writing, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we have to try to make the best of it as much as we can. And it would be a shame to spend the whole lockdown wanting to write and not writing. So you just have to
Mm.
decide, do you want to do something, or are you actually going to do it? And it's a good distraction. Even if you don't want to necessarily be published, I think writing is just such a therapeutic thing that when the world is this chaotic and this kind of scary and you're shut in a room, you should take advantage of that and do something for yourself instead of focusing on the fact that you can't go somewhere, you can't see your friends. Devote time to yourself and write, even if you don't know what's going to come from it, because you'll just feel better in general, and it will be a distraction from the kind of craziness going on.
Did you ever imagine that you would be so successful one day? Did you have any
Definitely not.
dream? No?
Definitely not. I never expected even like a tenth of this. I just wanted to have a full time job and,
Pay your
I don't know,
bills?
support myself, pay my bills. Yeah, just wanted to pay my bills. So this is definitely, anything after that just kind of is icing on the cake, because I never, even if I mean, I literally never even dreamed about it because it just would seem so unrealistic.
Yes. Do you think it's the passion for writing that led you to the success, or it's the how focused you were back then
I
as a
think
kid?
both. I think
Mm.
it was a lot of, with timing, a lot of dedication. I spent every day, all day writing this series, especially. I really just, I don't know what the kind of secret to why my book became so successful, but I do know that it had a lot to do with how much time I spent and how much I really was so passionate about the story that I almost couldn't stop even if I wanted to. So I
Mm.
think it's just about dedicating time and not being distracted by the rest of the world.
Are your heroes real people? based on real people?
Yeah, pretty much everything I write, even if it's not based on them personality wise, I like to have a face for the characters. And
Mm.
even when I read other people's books, I never see faces unless I can tie it to an actual person. Even if they describe the face like perfectly, I still just kind of see a blank face when I read. So when I write, I almost have to have an anchor of an actual person's face, even though the personality and life events and everything are not the same as the real person. I still like to have someone that I, in my head, can model the story after.
Yeah. What we live now is very unique. It's a unique situation that we will never forget in our lives. What would you recommend to the young people that follow you to do when they have free time? How to navigate in love? I mean,
I
there are so
would
many aspects of life that are affected.
Yeah, I mean, we are in a very, very strange, unprecedented time. So I would say when it comes to yourself, I think a lot of, especially for me during COVID, I realized that I never really give myself time. I give everyone else my time, and I don't take time to do the things that I actually want to do. So I would say to dedicate a lot of time to self care. I would say to meditate, even though some people think it's like kooky and weird, but meditation has really, really helped me just mentally process and kind of shut off my brain a little bit.
Do you do it at
Um,
night or in the morning?
Both. I meditate sometimes even in the middle of the day. I will meditate in the middle of the day. It's sometimes I don't know if it's the placebo effect where it just feels like it's working, but I don't care as long as it feels like it's working. But it's really calming. And I've kind of figured out a lot about myself in the last year, just kind of being alone with my thoughts and the way that I've
Mm.
been processing things and the way that I've been putting everyone else before myself. So I would say self care, even like little things like taking an extra long shower and listening to
Mm.
music while you're in the shower and not wasting time. Like it would be such a shame if we all leave this pandemic with, 75 hours that we spent on Facebook and 0 hours we spent with ourselves and knowing ourselves and trying to better ourselves, even if it's like, eating a little bit better, drinking more water, or walking when it's safe. Reading a book even is better than just sitting online all day.
Yes, correct. And what would you say to your fans that are looking for true love, the perfect lover?
I would say the perfect lover does not exist. I would
Don't say
say,
that.
I
It's okay.
know. I would say to make sure that you really know who you are and
Mm.
are very comfortable with yourself and love yourself before you try to find someone that's this perfect love. Because when we hold people to standards that are impossible to fit, it sets yourself up for failure. So if you know you're a good person, but you spend too much time on your phone, or you have too much anger, or you are easily emotional, know that the other person is going to come with those kind of flaws as well, and find somebody that balances you. I think love, as much as I'm cynical, I think love is the most important thing in the world. I think it's why we're all here, literally. And even though sometimes it feels like the opposite, but I would say make sure you're comfortable with who you are and you know who you are, because it's very easy to get lost in, new love and trying to change yourself for someone or trying to change another person. If you
Mm.
love someone and you love yourself, you shouldn't have to change them.
What do you think about the dating apps and the social media that many people nowadays use for dating?
I like the idea of dating online, but
Mm.
I have a lot of friends who do it. And when I try to give them advice or talk them through their dating, it can be very scary in a way that people aren't being their actual selves, because they're
Yes.
putting on the best version of who they think they are. And I always say there's three parts of yourself: who you are, who you think you are, and who you actually are. So it's, or who people think you are, who you think you are, and who you are. So just knowing that, putting on this, facade of you're the coolest kind of girl and you love this and you love that just to pretend to fit in with someone, doesn't make for a long lasting relationship. So for me, I wish people would do the opposite where you can be your complete self. It's like the only place in the world on the internet where you can actually be your real self. So just make sure you're being who you really are, not who you want to be. Otherwise, the relationship isn't going to last. But I do like the idea of meeting people that you would never have a chance to meet. But at the same time, I think some of the apps are setting up, very high false expectations. And sometimes it's become kind of like shopping for a human, which is scary. I don't like the idea of like looking at one picture and one bio and like swiping that you don't want them. It's like you're not buying a vacuum on Amazon, you're hoping to meet someone. So I don't really love that. And I think a lot of times it just sets up false expectations. And
Yeah.
a lot of people use, the most edited photo of themselves, and they put the best things about them, and then they keep up that facade, and then at the end they wonder why it didn't work. And it's like, well, because you pretended to be someone else and they did too, and then you meet and it's a totally different
It's a
person.
disaster.
Yes.
Studying different characters and exploring different characters for your books, how fast you think you can tell when you meet somebody? How fast you can get a glimpse of who he is or she is? I mean, do you get an idea of the person very fast?
Yeah, I have this weird, well, at least I think I do. I have a very good intuition, and I can, even if it's just platonic or if it's someone I'm working with, I usually know pretty quickly who they are. I can tell when people are lying. It's like, I feel like sometimes I'm like a psychic because I swear I can tell when people are lying immediately. I don't say it to them, but I just know when they are. I'm pretty fast at picking up on stuff, and I ask a lot of questions. I feel like I was a psychologist in my last life. So I just by asking people about their childhood or their parents or their siblings, you can learn a lot about them, which helps me with kind of understanding humans and different kinds of people that aren't the same as me.
Yes. Are there any dream characters or actors that you would like to have in your films now?
Yeah, there's a lot. I would love to work with Bill Skarsgård. He is just such a talented actor. I love him, and I feel like he's very underrated. The rest of them are Korean actors. I would love to work with Kim Woo Bin. I would love to work with Woo Do-won.
What
Um,
Korean?
I just love Korean film and series. I
Yeah.
pretty much only watch Korean series.
Really? They're
Yeah,
pretty good though.
they're so good. The quality is exceptional, especially right now in this very fast streaming world we're in. It's very hard for me. I'm very picky to find things that in my head are quality, especially for geared toward women and romances. And
Mm.
Korean series, the actors are just so disciplined and so good, and they're all usually trained, and the cinematography is so much better. It's just a different caliber, in my opinion. It's a different caliber of filmmaking and just telling a story in general. I really, really prefer Korean series over anything in the world, to be honest.
Do you spend time watching Netflix or other platforms?
Yeah, I watch Netflix. I pretty much watch just Korean dramas there, and then I
Yes.
watch a lot on Viki, which is
Mm.
a Asian only app that has Chinese, Taiwanese, Japanese,
Oh
Korean
my God.
series.
Trouble
Yeah,
would hit you.
yeah, yeah.
And is there any favorite series, American series that you have?
My favorite series, I would say. I mean, probably Uncontrollably Fond is my
Yes.
favorite series. It's a Korean series. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it's very good. If you're looking for something in English, I would recommend Normal People. I think Normal People was very well done, and the acting was just incredible.
On
Um,
Hulu.
yeah, on Hulu. I don't really watch anything else in English, to be
Are there
honest.
are, are there any writers that you are jealous of?
Um, No, I used to want to be J.K. Rowling, but I don't want to be her anymore, and I don't like her. So there's that. She created an incredible world, but her words are very damaging. So she kind of killed that childhood fantasy of mine.
Mm.
But before I would always say, I wish I wrote Harry Potter, but now I don't want that. So no, the rest of the authors I'm just happy for and would love to be in their mind, but I wouldn't really say it's jealousy. It's more of just admiration.
Did you ever think of writing a book about your life?
Yeah, I think about it a lot. I think eventually I'll probably write some kind of like memoir because
Mm.
my life has been very, not only just publishing, but even since I was a child, my life has been kind of a series of a lot of events that I think would help younger, well, even older women as well, but just women in general by reading these kind of experiences I've had and what I've learned from them and how to kind of break the cycle when it comes to family and addiction and all of these kind of things. So I think eventually I'll probably write like a memoir, but I'm only 30. How old am I? 32, 31, 31. I don't
So
even
young.
know. 31.
What
So
was the one thing that really affected you?
I would say the way that my mother was when I was growing up and the kind of environment that I grew up in was my mom is, she tried really hard to be a good mom, but some people just don't have the resources or the capability. So I've learned a lot. My whole childhood, I was really angry at her and didn't understand why she couldn't just be like other people's moms and why she had to drink every day and why she this and that. But then as I got older, I started having to kind of decide whether I wanted to love her for who she is and stop judging her, or if I wanted to keep trying to fight this and change her. And I don't believe in changing people. So I had to kind of just make a choice of, do I spend all this energy pointing out all the things that she did wrong or all the experiences I've had as a child that were bad, or do I try to love her for who she is and understand why she is the way she is, which really helped me as a woman and a mother and a wife and as a person in general, because I think a lot of times we look for excuses and not reasons, and there's a really big difference between an excuse for behavior and a reason why someone is the way they are.
Exactly. And this negative environment of the moment back then made you be isolated, writing, exploring the book world, and then you become who you are now, right?
Yes, exactly. So I wouldn't change any of it. And my mom, I always tell her that I do believe that she gave me the best of her that she could. She just didn't have that much to give.
Yes. And now she feels
And
happy with your success?
yeah, I mean, she's very happy for me. She wasn't really that surprised by the writing though, because I've always been a huge reader and I've always just kind of daydreamed all the time.
Yes.
So she is very happy for me. But a lot of people in my family haven't really had, I come from a family where no one really goes to college or anything. So me being a writer is like, just some of them don't even understand it really, which I don't blame them because it's pretty crazy. But
And then getting into the movie industry, it's another big thing, right?
yeah, that was a whole other thing. Some, like, even my mamaw, which is my grandmother, she um when I got published and stuff, she was like, "Oh, that's cool." But then when the movie came, she was like, "Oh, wow, you're famous now." And I'm like, "I've been a best-selling author for 6 years, mamaw." Like, it's funny how the film industry changes the way that success is measured. But for me, I'd much rather be a successful author than have the film. So it's funny the way it changes what
Are
people's
there any
perception is.
thoughts of writing a book that will explore this period that we live in now, the COVID period, love in the
Um,
COVID times, or no?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know exactly what it would be yet, but I think this time period is really, I've written a kind of secret book that I'm not allowed to talk about or able to talk about, but I've been putting a lot into my creativity. Otherwise, I think I would go a little crazy. But then there's parts of me that are like, what what realm of reality do we want to explore, because do people want to read books where everyone's wearing a mask and people have to get COVID tests, or do they want the escape from reality? And for me, I usually write really grounded, realistic ish stories. So finding the balance of how to keep people's minds off of the chaos in the world, but also being realistic has been a little tricky.
Are you optimistic about the future?
I am actually. I think that all of the, politics and all of the bad things happening in the world are happening to teach us what we're doing wrong and showing us that we are not as far in advance as we thought we were. I think any kind of big social change always comes from really negative chaos. So I think as long as we stay together, and I mean, the fact that an election has everybody, including myself, feeling like, the world can end at any time. I think we need to realize that we should never be that reliant on a person or a politician or a government, and really focus on your own community and what you're doing every day to be a good person, instead of arguing over politics or obsessing and idolizing a politician. No one should ever
Mhm.
idolize any political figure ever. And now it's become more of a source of entertainment than an actual reality of what policies are right and wrong, instead of obsessing and being kind of drawn to the chaos of entertainment. So I'm
Yes.
pretty optimistic given the young people, especially. I don't really have too much faith in the older generations anymore, in my country at least, just because they've shown that they're not ready to change. But the young people, especially, I have a lot of faith in them. And I think this is a rough time for the whole world. Each country has their own issues, but I think at the end of the day, we'll all be fine eventually.
Yes. Would you like to reveal any secret project that you have to the fans of Levine's publications and public?
I can't reveal too much, but I can say that I'm working on multiple things that are completely, they have no idea. So for
Yeah.
2021, I would just be ready to have like a lot of things coming from me, because I've been very quiet about all of the things I'm kind of working on in the background. And so I think they probably assume that I just don't have anything coming, but there's a lot of stuff coming next year.
Can
And
you reveal the title?
what?
The title?
I can't tell you the title. No, you almost got me, but I can't.
Okay.
Um,
Not even what it's gonna be about.
I can tell you that one thing is about how, let me think how I can tell you without it being too much. One thing is about two different cultures and how you can how hard it is and can be to fall in love with someone when you don't understand their culture and they don't understand yours. But at the end of the day, we're all humans and we're all connected just by being
Human.
human. So it was really fun to write, but I can't really say anything else about it.
Thank you. When do you think we can have it printed?
Definitely next year is a
Next year
couple
is not
things.
far.
Yeah, not far. So next year, in the beginning of the year, will be a few announcements, and then I'm sure all my publishers are ready with the printers. So should be good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. You are
Thank
32
you.
years old, so successful, so creative. You're an icon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.